Good morning. As Pastor Josh maybe mentioned, we're going to start something new this week. We're going to take the summer and the fall to journey through the book of Exodus. If you'd like to read along with us, there's a reading plan like this one in the back on the white table as you leave, so you can pick that up and follow along with us. The book of Exodus was an intentional choice for a couple of reasons. There are lots of connections that we can draw to our own experiences. I'm not saying we're persecuted. No one is trying to enslave you. No army is pursuing you. But the story of Exodus is the story of God's presence on behalf of his people. So we can draw from that even if our situation doesn't exactly match theirs. And as we move through the book, one of the things that will help keep it sort of fresh for us each week is that each sermon will be built around a question you might be asking, but also that curious, maybe even skeptical people in your own life might also ask. So this will give you some encouragement, some assurance about your own faith, and also hopefully some things that you might be able to share with others in your life. So that's our goal, that's our plan. We're starting at the beginning, as you might imagine, so let's get into it. Exodus is the continuation of the story of Genesis. We miss this in our English translation. We have the words, these are the names of the people, right? But the first word of Exodus, these, actually begins with a conjunction called a vav that means and. And these are the names. The title of the book in Hebrew is actually names. And these are the names of the people who went down to Egypt. So it picks up exactly where Genesis left off. And where was that? Joseph, made famous for his Technicolor Dreamcoat, was sold into slavery by his brothers who were resentful of him and ended up in Egypt, the neighboring country to the area that would become Israel, the place where Joseph lived. Israel, by the way, is the name for Jacob, the father of the family, the father of Joseph and all those other brothers. So the land that they eventually would inhabit would be named for him, Israel. In time, through God's intervention on his behalf, Joseph rose to become second in command over all of Egypt, and he had foreseen that there would be a severe drought in the near future. So as prime minister, essentially would have been kind of his role. He stockpiled, carefully managed the stores of all of Egypt, stockpiling grain and other things in order that Egypt could withstand this drought that was coming. And when eventually that drought did happen, it impacted Israel as well, so that Joseph's family was forced to go to Egypt looking for grain and food. Joseph reconciled with them, those famous words, what you intended for evil, God meant for good. And eventually they went to live permanently in Egypt. 70 members of the family went to Egypt. That's a significant number because it numerically matches something called the Table of Nations, an accounting of all the nations in the world at the time recorded earlier in Genesis. So in a literary way, these 70 people represent or stand in for not just that small group, but all the nations of the world, all of humanity. The author of Exodus, traditionally understood to be Moses, is telling us we're going to learn something about God's interaction not just with a few dozen people, but his interaction with all of humanity, how he feels toward them, what he's up to for them. That's the story that Exodus wants to be telling us. 70 people of the family went to Egypt at the time of the drought and Joseph's rule there, and over the course of time, say 30, 40, maybe even 50 years, those original 70, including Joseph, died, as people do. The drought and the crop troubles that brought on, they also would have alleviated and subsided as droughts do eventually let up. So now, these people, these descendants of Jacob, they were in a foreign place with no reason to be there anymore and with no remaining connection to the history that brought them there. They longed to go back. We know that because much later when the Israelites finally did leave Egypt, they brought Joseph's bones with them. apparently at his request. So even Joseph, the most privileged position, second in command over the whole country, a national hero for the work that he did, even he longed to get out of there, to go back home. One way or another, even in death, even he longed to go back home. So how much more must everybody else in a lower position have felt that too? They longed to go back. But God had told Abraham earlier on that his descendants, this family of Jacob, would be in Egypt 400 years. No reason was given for that. He just said it. It's recorded in Genesis 15. So if Joseph died, let's say he died 50 years into his family's time in Egypt, there might have been 350 years or more left for them there. Multiple lifetimes before they could get back where they wanted to be. And in that situation, it would have been so easy, so natural for them to ask, why? What's God up to here? What's taking him so long to act? There are things in your own life that make you ask those questions, aren't there? How does this situation look like our lives? Not because anyone's enslaving us or pursuing us, but think about this. What is the thing in your life that you long to be free from? An action, a behavior pattern, a feeling, or maybe a limitation that you have, maybe a relationship that isn't good for you, that you would love to get away from. Here's something that's true of that thing. Whatever that is for you, it probably started for a reason. It was necessary and helpful in your life. It may not have been the best answer, but it was an answer to something you were struggling with in that moment. A coping mechanism, a protective strategy, maybe just necessary to get by at that time. Even if you didn't know exactly what it was answering, that thing, it was answering something. But now, as time has gone by, it doesn't seem so helpful anymore. It might even be dangerous, hurtful to people you love and to you. And so you long to be done with it. Possibly you've even prayed about it. Prayed and prayed and prayed for God to take it from you. And you know he doesn't work by magic. So you've tried counseling and therapy, accountability and white knuckling. You've read all the books and tried all the blogs. You've tried acknowledging the thing. You've tried ignoring the thing. Everything in between, you've tried it. And yet here you are stuck in a place you don't want to be. So let's ask that question today. What's taking so long? If God is with us and he wants the best for us, and certainly a God who loves you would not want you to struggle in this way, right? And so what's taking so long? Why is it taking him so long to do this for you, to bring you out of this? I affirm the question, but having set up the question, I have to acknowledge something right at the outset. I don't have an answer for it. One of the things we try to do here is to say, to root everything we say, to ground all of our answers in what the Bible says, and pretty much only there. And there's nothing there that tells us why God takes the time he does to act in the ways we wish he would. Nothing that tells us why he's so slow. But here's what I do hope to do for you this morning as we go along. I want to offer you 3 questions that I hope will give you a new perspective on the slowness of God. So to do that, let's get back to the story of these Israelites. As they wait there in Egypt for all those years, they increase in number. That's what we read. And that's somewhat natural, of course, as time goes on, but there seems to be something more going on here. As if to emphasize the magnitude of this increase, there are 5 different verbs, just in those opening sentences of Exodus, 5 separate verbs that all mean to increase or to become more. And here's an interesting thing about those verbs. Several of them, if we look at the Hebrew that's behind the English, several of them are words like swarm or team, T-E-E-M. Not words you would normally associate with human beings, right? But these words are words that we first saw back in Genesis 1, back in the story of creation. And I don't think that's accidental. I think it's intentionally signaling a continuity. If you know the creation story, you know there was a job, you might even say a promise, given to Adam and later to Eve: be fruitful and multiply. Team, swarm over all the earth. That's what God said he put them there for and what he promised to do for them. And now, after all these years and centuries, after sin has come in and ruptured the relationship between God and his people, here in this time of slowness and longing and waiting, after everything that's happened, here they are, teeming and swarming. Here they are, being fruitful and multiplying, just as God promised them that they would. Still, after all this, God is working for them in exactly the way he promised that he would be. And I think there's some hope in here for you. I think there's a promise in here for you as well. Here's what I think that you can take from it. Whatever that thing is that you long to be free from, that you can't seem to get yourself out from under, whatever has happened between you and God that you've done to that relationship in turning to some answer other than the one he has for you, something that now doesn't seem so good. However far you've gone from him, as ruptured as your relationship might be, still his promises to you stand. Even now, his invitation to you is the same. Here and now, after all that, after everything that's happened, he will be at work for you in just the way he always promised he would be. You can trust in that. I want to look at this same idea, though, from a little bit different angle to bring us to the first of those questions. The Israelites are just going about their lives all this time, all these years, going to work, feeding families, raising children, conducting business, waiting in line, shouting operator into the phone over and over until they get a human being. And all the while carrying with them this weight and this longing. And all the time, God is doing what he always said he would do. So the first question to consider is this: what if the answer you're looking for, the work of God, is in the mundane, everyday things of life? What if it's been right there all along, the answer you're looking for, just below the surface of your day-to-day, same old, same old? As time marches on, a new Pharaoh rises to power. And that would have happened dozens of times. Remember, we're talking about 350 years or more. Moses writes, this one didn't know Joseph. On one level, that's obvious, right? This is perhaps 300 years after Joseph died, so of course the new ruler didn't know him. That's not quite what it means, though. There's more to it than being unaware. There's more going on here than simple ignorance. The word used here for know is the word yada, intimate knowledge or connection. The story of Joseph, how he saved the country through foresight and shrewd management, would have been passed down from generation to generation. An Egyptian would know Joseph in the same way that you and I know George Washington. We don't know him, but we know him, right? But here's the thing. You might know the story of George Washington, certainly you do, but I would guess that it doesn't really impact you much. I would guess it doesn't move you. You don't direct or decide anything about your life based on the story of George Washington. Fair? Yes. That's what Moses is saying about this new Pharaoh. He doesn't care about the story of Joseph. It's not that he doesn't know it. He doesn't care about it. He doesn't feel bound to honor that history. He doesn't have any sort of positive regard for these descendants of Joseph because of that story. The particular Pharaoh, he's never named, which seems intentional. In Egyptian culture, the Pharaoh was functionally a god. He was the most powerful man on the planet. There was power in his name. So not naming him is a not so subtle way of saying he is not the power in this story. It's intentional. But whoever he was, he probably had some geopolitical trouble. The timing, the chronology on this is a little fuzzy. But using 1 Kings 6:1, this is in your sermon resources in your Church Center app if you want to look at it later. Using 1 Kings 6:1, which references 2 points in time. It talks about the 4th year of King Solomon's reign, which we can be really pretty certain is the year 966 BC. Then also it says it matches that to 480 years after the people left Egypt. So 966 BC is 480 years after they left Egypt. We can work backward, which in this case means counting up. In BC years, we count up, right? To say they would have left somewhere around 1450 BC. There's another side to that story. The family of Jacob weren't the only Semitic people in Egypt. Semitic roughly means people from the region of Canaan that would become Israel, and there was at least one more group that overlapped with these Israelites. Around 1530 BC, so about 120 years before the Exodus, they're there at the same time, there are records of a Pharaoh Ahmose I expelling a group of these people called the Hyksos, Hykos. A group of people, these Semitic people, who were at one point powerful enough that they ruled Egypt. They subjugated the Egyptians. So it's not hard then to imagine this Pharaoh, a Pharaoh like that, finally getting rid of these Semitic rulers, looking around then at the other numerous group of people who are the same, very similar, and saying, never again. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or else they will multiply and increase, and we'll be right back where we started, under their thumb. So he uses then, whoever this Pharaoh is, he uses some propaganda to stir up the Egyptians. It is not factually true that the Israelites were more numerous than the Egyptians, more powerful than the Egyptians, but he's using some propaganda to get them stirred up. To keep them, this Israelite group, small. He wants to keep them from growing. But God has already ordained that. He's already purposed that they will grow and multiply. Pharaoh, somebody, puts the Israelites into forced labor to keep them small. There are 5 verbs used for service or servitude, just as there are 5 verbs used for what? Multiply. As much as they are burdened, that much they multiply. Equal to their burden is their multiplication by God's will. If there is something in your life that seems to be encountering obstacles or setbacks, trust it to God. Because if it is of God, nothing will stand against it. Pharaoh, somebody learned that the hard way. He says he's going to deal wisely with these people, but everything he plans, everything he tries goes opposite of what he had in mind. So he gets increasingly desperate, increasingly self-defeating in his desperation. First, ordering the midwives to kill the Hebrew boy babies. The midwives subvert that order. Interestingly, they do it by using Pharaoh's prejudice against him. We have those words, you all chuckled at it. The women are more vigorous. Another way of rendering that is to say the women are like animals. Yeah, let's finish the thought. A common prejudice by the Egyptians against the Semitic people is that they were like animals. So in saying that, Pharaoh, the midwives use Pharaoh's imagined prejudice against him to justify letting the boy babies live. They make fun of him a little bit in order to justify letting these boys live. Martin Luther comments on this moment, by the way, when he's talking about and teaching on the 4th commandment, also in your sermon resource notes. He's talking about honor your father and mother, and he broadens that to include submitting to authorities. But he uses this example of these midwife women to clarify that we're only expected to submit to authorities insofar as the authority conforms with God's will. If it doesn't, we don't submit to it. When Pharaoh figures out that the midwives aren't going to do his bidding, he enlists all the Egyptians. First, a secret plot, now a public proclamation. We can see him being increasingly desperate and despotic here. Presumably, many of the Egyptians did as they were told. It would be dangerous not to, right? So a lot of little boys went into the river, which meant then that Pharaoh was killing off his free labor force. So it's a self-defeating plan. That's what happens when we try to go against God's ways. That's where it gets us when we try to solve things in our own way, self-defeating, increasingly small and closed in and closed off. We're not told how long all this went on, perhaps for 100 years or more. And all the while, the Israelites are multiplying. Even the midwives have families. And that's really important. These two women are named specifically in the story. Almost nobody else is. And this detail is in there that they were given families. It's not a throwaway detail. It's a way of saying they flourished. They reached their fullest potential. It's a specific marker of the flourishing of God's people. Even as this maniac is raging and babies are being tossed into the river all over the place, God's people are flourishing. So here's our second question. What if the answer for you right now is not deliverance from the struggle, but flourishing in it? What if the answer for you now, God's answer, is not deliverance from your struggle, but flourishing in it? What if you were to stop waiting to be fixed? What if you were to stop putting off whatever comes next until you are better at this? What if you were to quit focusing on what's wrong or deficient about you and live for God's purposes now? Because here's the thing, I don't think you are any different than those midwives or all those other Israelites. They were not perfect. There's no suggestion that they were without fault. They were just pursuing God's purposes, and he flourished them. And I think he wants to do the same for you. In fact, I know it. I know it because I see it in his word. I see it when Jesus says he came to give you abundant life. Not after you're fixed, but now. Not when you're worthy of it somewhere down the line. Right now, he wants to give it to you. And so what if while you were asking God to take from you that thing that's weighing you down, that you long to be done with, what if you also started to ask him what he has planned for you, what he has in mind for you in your family and your church and your community for his goals and their good, and you started to pursue that thing right now? I think you can. Even before you're fully perfected. I think that's what God wants for you. As we close out this story and get to our final question, there are a couple of things we have to acknowledge. The first is that all this stuff I've been saying about God's answer to them in the midst of their hard time and longing to be done with the thing they were still stuck in, all of that would have been extraordinarily hard to see in that moment. For them to see in that moment, very, very difficult. What they could see was long years and hard labor and crazy murderous dictators and their sons being killed left and right. That was their daily experience. We can see much more than that, can't we? We see the elevation of Joseph, the mighty prospering of the people, oppression that was intended to stomp it out, instead magnifying it, the defiance of those midwives, and the explicit proclamation that God is involved with them because of that. We see ultimately the futility of this entire escape prevention experiment. In fact, when finally in chapter 3 the Israelites do leave Egypt, the way it's described word for word as the thing that Pharaoh tried to prevent. Word for word it says it did not work. We see all that. They wouldn't have. It's worth noting, even as we see all that stuff, everything that God was up to all along, it's worth noting that none of those things were precisely what those people would have been looking for in that moment. It's not what they would have wanted in those long years. They wanted to be free of the struggle and go back home, to be let go from all of this. It's not quite what they wanted, but at the same time, there were all kinds of moments within the very long story of the lives of these people. Some of them make or break moments, and some just the normal goings-on of life. Things that go well for them, that break their way. And you have those in your life too. As you journey through with this thing that you wish you could be freed from or delivered of, you have those moments, big, small, significant, mundane, that are less than the deliverance you want, but that have gone your way. This could be coincidence, could be stars aligning or lucky breaks, or it could be God at work all the way through, long before he answers. That's his promise. We believe that God operates in what we call two kingdoms. the heavenly realm and the one that we are in, our earthly realm. And we believe that he rules and reigns in both, but in that heavenly realm, he is a direct ruler, while here he rules indirectly. That means he doesn't intervene directly to cancel or undo the impacts of sin in our lives. He gives us earthly rulers to do that. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. He works indirectly here. And that's why his working doesn't look always usually like clouds opening up, voices coming down, miraculous, magnificent things. It looks instead more often like regular stuff. Regular things that break our way, that go well. But even as he's at work indirectly, your God does care for you. Enough, in fact, deeply enough to send Jesus among us, to heal your relationship with him and set you up one day to be in that heavenly kingdom with him. And even beyond that, in the meantime, which is to say right here and right now, he opens the way for healing and restoration and the renewing of things that are broken, because he cares about you so much that it matters to him not simply what happens to you after you die, but right here, right now, your God cares about how things go for you in this place. That's what he's up to right now, right here. But the thing about that indirect work of God is that it's really hard to recognize in the moment. You really only can see it looking back. So that's our third and final question. What if looking back could help you trust the present and the future? If you long for the answer, where is God? Try looking back. Do some journaling or talk with a friend and try asking, where has God been? That question in itself might be hard to answer. You might not come up with much at first. So instead, here's how you get started. Just list the significant moments of your life, the turning point moments in your life. And then, once you've got those on paper, do it again. List this time the less significant moments of your life. And as you're doing that, ask yourself, where can I see, looking back, where can I see that God has been at work, was at work in that? This might be where you need a trusted friend or a spouse or someone to help you discern that, to help you see what you can't see. But I promise you, he's there. As you're able to recognize the moments where God has already been at work, it's going to build your confidence in his work now and in the future. And here's a bonus. We're going to end with this. Not only does it build your confidence in God's work now and in the future, it's going to actually help you see God's work here and in the future even better. So we're going to wrap up there. It's a long time I've been talking. We'll wrap up with those three questions. What if God's answer for you is in the mundane, everyday things of life? What if that answer for you right now is not deliverance from the struggle yet, but flourishing in it? And what if looking back can help you trust the present and God's work in the future? In his name, amen.